Today we're going to talk about Derek Chauvin, the police officer who pleaded guilty to taking the life of George Floyd by kneeling on his neck until he expired. He was put into federal prison. He's serving a very lengthy sentence, and as a lot of people have assumed, something finally happened to him. He was stabbed by another incarcerated person. And there have been a lot of responses to this. I made a shorter video and had people applauding it, other people saying, no, this is terrible, or prisons need to be run better, and it really is a complicated issue. It's not a complicated issue that, like, he's a great guy. He does come from a system that is very broken and that does not train police officers to de-escalate or do things properly. He does come from a broken culture. What he did was reprehensible, and he needed to be punished. That's why he's in prison. However, the idea that we're celebrating someone who has assaulted him, or we're celebrating someone who has caused some other act of violence toward him, is a really dangerous precedent. Because people will say, oh, well, it's karma, and he deserved this. But the problem is that things like this happen all the time. In this Bureau of Prisons place, I mean, horrible things have happened. Literally, there was a guy with a gun trying to shoot a visitor at the low-level camp where he's at currently. And these are not things that should be happening. The Bureau of Prisons should be much better run, should be much better organized, it should be much safer. Because otherwise, we say, oh, well, that's karma for him, but somebody else doesn't deserve it. We say, George Floyd didn't deserve to die. But all of a sudden, when we start allowing and justifying vigilante justice, we're doing the very same thing that those who defended Derek Chauvin or defended other people who've taken lives do. They say, oh, well, he started it, or he deserved it, or, well, it's complicated, or he had to do this, or whatever excuse people come up with. And the reality is that there's violence happening every single day in prisons across this country. And I'm really grateful that I was in prisons that may have been violent, but not nearly to the degree that other ones are. And when we have situations like that kid in Alabama who was kidnapped and beaten and rented out and tortured, like that happened to a human being. This is not acceptable. This is not okay. We need to address issues like this. And I got a lot of DMs and comments from people who've been locked up. Some even claim to be in the same system in Alabama or maybe the same prison, saying, oh, you know how it is, like when somebody perpetrates a fraud or when somebody owes money or they want to, try to bang, they want to do whatever. And again, they were explaining this is something this kid brought on himself. And I don't know the reality of what happened or what that kid did or didn't do, but it's the idea that, again, we're justifying this being okay. That we're saying that in any world or any walk of life or any situation, it's okay for someone to be beaten and rented out and tortured. It's okay for somebody to be stabbed and almost lose their lives. It's okay for these horrendous things to happen. And the really scary thing is 95% of those incarcerated people are going to be out one day. They're going to be our neighbors. They're going to be our friends. They're going to be our coworkers. They're going to be all these things. Do we really want somebody who's had to live in that traumatic an environment with that much violence and that much like kind of fear, what do you call it, fight or flight reflex, like constantly in that space of trying to defend themselves? Because that person getting out is not going to adjust very well to society. It is the very same problem we have with veterans coming back from overseas, not getting adequate treatment for their PTSD. Now we have a bunch of people who've been using homemade weapons to defend themselves and have the same level of PTSD, and they're not looking for a military weapon. They're not looking for some organized force. They're grabbing something, breaking it in half, and trying to stab somebody with it. Like, this is not what we want people getting out of prison to do. And further, it's the idea. In a lot of the federal prisons, they actually have the sign up that says, you are here as punishment. You are not here to be punished. This is really reasonable because it's not about making prison miserable. It's not about making prison dangerous. It's not about making prison so terrible that nobody wants to go, because that doesn't work. The deterrent quality just doesn't work. If it did, we wouldn't have one of the highest offense rates and the highest recidivism rates in the world. We have all those deterrents, but they don't work. Instead, the idea is, okay, we've removed these people from society. They've done something wrong, sometimes something horrendous, and we need to not have them around other people that they can victimize or in a situation where they can cause further harm. But instead of then saying, okay, we're going to hold them accountable for their actions by like a restorative justice program or anything that asks them to talk about and take accountability for what they've done, and then we're going to give them the help they need. Because the basis that people forget is that happy, whole, healthy people don't go out and commit heinous crimes. This is not something that somebody does. When somebody is existing in a state of poverty or in a state of trauma or a state of fear or a state of addiction, that's why they go out and do those things. Nobody just wakes up one morning and is like, I think I want to go take somebody's life, or I just want to go rob some old lady, or whatever thing we're talking about. This isn't something that comes from a happy, healthy place, and it doesn't get punished away. You cannot punish trauma away. Just think about, like, if you have a dog that's been beaten, or a dog that's been mistreated, and you think you're going to, kick the dog and it's going to get better? Like, in our minds, we immediately understand that if you kick a traumatized dog, it is not going to get better. But we do that to people over and over and over, and then wonder why we have such a high recidivism rate, or wonder why we have so many problems. And it just blows my mind, because if somebody were to come from the outside, if somebody were to come from a different country with the same level of technology and understanding, but no history or no knowledge of the prison system, we tried to explain it to people. And we were like, well, So it's a place where we stick people who've been like unable to function in society, and it's a place where we don't help them, but we just like stick them with a bunch of other people who haven't been able to function in society. And then when they get out in 3 months or 3 years or 30 years, we wonder why they have trouble adjusting. And whoever you told that to would look at you like, "Are you kidding me? This it doesn't make any sense." So again, the issue is that we have people like Derek Chauvin that are very easy to villainize and very easy to say, "Oh, he's a terrible person. He deserves this." He deserves to be in prison. Like that was the ruling. That was what he pleaded guilty to. That was what he was found guilty to on all the charges. To then add justice to that and say, oh well, he needs to suffer. He needs to be stabbed. He needs to be beaten. He needs to be brutalized. We're again justifying the violence that we say we're opposed to. The thing that he did to someone else, we're saying is okay to do to him. We are perpetuating a cycle of violence, and that's the very thing that's happening inside of prisons. It's people who were abused and neglected, whose needs weren't met, who suffer from mental illness, from trauma, and from addiction, who are then passing that pain or that trauma or that suffering on to other people who then become traumatized and try to cope and try to meet their needs and end up passing that pain on. It's a disease. It's a communicable disease. And the only way to stop it is to stop people, have them be accountable, actually have them look at the consequences of their actions, have them look at what they've done, have them look at what that has done to other people's lives, then give them the tools to change it. Because first we have to realize there's a problem. There are a lot of people in prison who don't take accountability. They don't accept that they, need to do things differently. But when you're sitting face to face with somebody who you've harmed, or face to face with somebody who's been harmed in a similar way to the way that you harmed someone else, you can't get away from that. I never hit anybody driving drunk, but we sat in a class in the victim impact program, this pilot program, and this girl and her mother sat in the class and told us how a drunk driver put her in a wheelchair to where she will never walk again. To go from a career, hoping to dance and do this professionally and what she wanted to do, to the fact that she would never walk again. And listening to the mother scream about having gotten the 911 call and showing up on the accident scene and hearing that she probably won't make it because they're having to use the jaws of life and it's taking too long and she's bled out too much. When you hear that, you can't run away from that. You can't justify, like, oh, she deserved it, or oh, no, you can't. You had a room full of people in tears, like heart open, absolutely broken. And that's how you help people change. Because first, you bring them to a moment of utter humanity. You bring them to face the consequences of their actions, or the consequences of actions similar to theirs, and then you say, hey, you did this, but you don't have to keep doing this. There's another way, and we'll show you. We're going to help you get the help you need, and then we're going to help you show a different way to live. But we don't do that. That was a pilot program that was shut down during COVID. It's a national program. It's available in a bunch of places, but most states don't even think it's important, even though it was the most meaningful, the most important class I had in the entire 19 years I was incarcerated. So my hope is that when we have these discussions or we have horrible things happen, like what happened to Derek Chauvin or what Derek Chauvin did, we don't continue to perpetuate that cycle of violence. Because otherwise, if we say it's okay to do to Derek Chauvin, ultimately what we're saying by the trickle-down effect is it's okay for that 22-year-old kid in Alabama who was serving 12 months for theft to be beaten, to be kidnapped, to be abused, and to be tortured. And if we think that's okay, we really need to step back and check our moral compass.